This is StewardShift, a show that gives you the tools you need to get the most of your best resources. Your money, your mind, your body, your time.
Welcome back to the StewardShift show. I'm starting off with a riddle. You've probably heard it before. What's the one thing that you can waste but never buy? And of course, it's time. Today, we're talking about time. This idea of time is a very crucial one. And I want to begin by saying that time is something that wasn't always a thing. That's a strange way to start, I know, but just bear with me. If you're a person of faith, particularly a person of faith who believes in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, you would probably then believe in what's called creation. You would believe that God created the world and everything in it. But then you would probably also believe that, yes, God created everything perfectly, but there came a point in time that the imperfect came in, and we call that sin. Sin just ruined everything. Well, here's the thing about time. Before sin came into the world, time wasn't a thing. Timekeeping began when sin entered. Why is that? Well, because when things were perfect, everything lived forever. And when everything lived forever, there was no reason to keep time. But once sin came into the world, and with sin came death and all those kinds of things, well, you started keeping time because nothing was forever anymore. And so you started marking the years that people were alive, and you started keeping time. And when I say keeping time, I don't mean counting minutes and seconds and hours and whatnot. That was probably always a thing because there was always day and there was always night. There were always months and those kinds of things. There was always a week. But keeping time in the sense that, oh man, I don't have a whole lot of time. Well, that just wasn't a reality before sin and before death and those kinds of things. But because now we just live in a messed up and marred world, we all have to live with these constraints that time isn't forever, that eventually we will run out of time, whether that's time in the day, and God help us. I feel like I'm always running out of time every single day. But I think the essence of time that's just like really breathing down our necks is the fact that, man, we don't have a lot of lifetime. Eventually, even if we lived our healthiest, and I just in love with this documentary on Netflix I think it's called Live to 100. Great documentary. But even if we live to 100 or past 100, at some point, we're all going to die. I don't mean to be morbid, but that's just a reality. But I need us to maybe just kind of start with this scripture, and this is from King David, one of the kings of the Israelites, where it says, this is also in the Old Testament in the Hebrew Bible, Psalm 90, verse 12. He asks God to teach us to number our days. Strange request, especially because numbering our days began with sin entering into this world. But David is just kind of embracing this notion that it's just like, okay, I'm not going to just ignore the fact that we don't live forever. I'm going to embrace it. It is what it is at this point. God, just, if you would, just teach us to number our days. Why? That we may gain a heart of wisdom. Now, there's a little bit more, and I'm going to get to that in just a second, but man, it's just so amazing that David understood that, all right, in order to steward the time that I have left here in this world, and I don't know when I'm going to pass away, no one knows. He said, look, I need wisdom in order to do it and to steward anything well. This is just kind of a shift in how we handle the resources that we have. In order to steward anything well, whether it's your time, your money, whether it's your body, whether it's your mind, whether it's your career, you need wisdom in order to do that. Teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. But man, this is just so crazy because when I read some of the verses around that one particular verse, that was Psalm 90 and verse 12, David acknowledges some things to God. He says, this is verse 2, same chapter, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. In other words, God, you live outside of the realm of time. And indeed, he does, because if there's one thing I believe about God is that he has never sinned. There's nothing evil about him. Therefore, he won't ever die in the sense of an ultimate death. And if that's the case, then he always lived in eternity past and will always live in eternity future. And this kind of sets the context for David asking or requesting God to teach him to number his days. Well, because God lives outside of the realms of time. And if there's one person, if there's one being in this universe that just understands how to manage time, we can learn how to do that from God because he has it all. Then in verse 4, also, that was verse 2, this is verse 4, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by. So today, I'm in the afternoon. It's around 2:30 or so in the afternoon as I'm recording. This day will come to an end at some point soon. The sun will set in about 4 or 5 hours or so. But David is saying, hey, look, this day that I'm living right here and right now, man, you've lived thousands of these. You've lived like 1,000 of your days, God, is like the one day that I've lived. God just lives outside of the realm of time. So if there's any being that we can learn about time management from and how to enjoy the days that we have, it's gotta be God. So if you're like me, you've probably kicked yourself a million times because of how much time you've wasted. There are some times when I'm like, dude, what did you do today? You can't wish there were more hours in the day and you don't spend the hours that you do have wisely. So I'm always like in this search for more wisdom as to how to manage and handle the hours that I do have. And there's some time killers. There are also some time savers that we'll talk a little bit about. But there's some time killers that I would say the vast majority of our culture deals with. I'm going to say number one, oh man, this one is just a killer. Probably my number one killer for me is scrolling. Dude, I sometimes I scroll. They call it doom scrolling. Sometimes I'm just scrolling. And next thing I know, I look up half hour, 1 hour, hour and a half has passed by. And I'm like, man, I haven't been productive during this time at all. That time could have very well been spent reading or learning or developing a skill or doing something more important than seeing everyone's pages and posts that I don't care much about at all. It's cool to see it, I suppose, but it's not doing anything for me personally. It's doing something for the companies that own the social media. That's neither here nor there. It's making them money. My attention is giving them all of my attention and whatnot. It's giving them up, doing something for them, but literally it's not putting any money in my pocket. It's not helping me to develop a skill. It's not doing so. I don't know about you. That's one of my biggest time killers. Submit something in the comments. Like, what's your biggest time killer? What's something that's just like, yo, I wish. And I do this often enough where I just tend to regret it. This is something I just need to weed out of my life. And what are also some of your biggest time savers? I'm going to tell you something right now that one of my biggest time savers is setting up my day the night before. I've noticed something in my life, like when I don't set a schedule for myself the day before, I tend not to be nearly as productive and I tend to waste more time, a lot more time than I'd like. That's just like one of my biggest time savers. And I'm sure that you have some as well. Share in the comments, like what literally helps you to save some time. There's an article that was written that talks about the average person's time wasted every single year. And this is going to blow your mind. The average person wastes 26 days every single year due to just wasted time. Now, we're not talking about rest and, getting rest and recreation and making sure that your mental is going all right. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about kind of thumb twiddling, maybe doom scrolling or something similar to that. We're talking about a month every single year on average is wasted. Now we're going to connect this to money because I believe, as you already know, one of the themes of the podcast of the show is connecting everything to money, what that bottom line is. But just get this: if the average person makes $27.61 per hour, if you take how much time has been wasted those 26 days, we're wasting on average $5,743 every single year. Now, for most of us, that's a great raise. That's really, really good. I mean, if you make six figures, if you make $100,000 a year and you got a 5.7%, almost 6% raise, you're all right with that, right? That's what $5,743 would be. I mean, if you make $50,000 a year, that's well over 10% of a raise, which is awesome. Really, really good. I mean, come on. That's a lot of time and that's a lot of money to waste, or to even say that could be time spent working on a side hustle or doing some sort of gig or something that could actually put dollars in your pocket instead of taking dollars out of your pocket. That's the bottom line there. All right, so what can you do right now? What shift can you make to deal with your time or to manage your time better? Here's a small shift that you can do to make that happen. Here it is. Knock out your most difficult task early in the day. A lot of times we waste time because we're anticipating that big task, or we just don't really want to get it done, and we spend a lot of time just, twiddling thumbs or doing this instead of that, the things that just don't really matter. But when you knock out your most important task the first thing in the day, your day just becomes so much easier. Then if you're building up to the hardest task of the day and you try to wait until the end of the day to do that, your anticipation of it is just killing you. But when you take care of that largest task of the day first, then you don't have anything that's as major as that, and you get the ball rolling. You're using that motivation and just everything that's already been accomplished. And you're like, dude, I can accomplish everything else in my day because I already did the hardest thing. So that's a small shift that you can make in your life right now in order to make this happen. Now, here's a big shift. All right. Some of us are going to do some small shifts, and that's fine. I think small shifts over time amount to big shifts. But if you have it in you to accomplish a big shift, here's your big shift. I need you to prune your day. And by prune your day, I mean, I need you to cut out some stuff that you don't need to be doing. I know for me, I've wasted a lot of time, and I can't say wasted because these are things that need to be done. If you're familiar with that quadrant, there are some things that are urgent and important. There's some things that are not urgent, but are important. But look, I've wasted enough time in my life doing things that are not urgent and are not important, and I'm refusing to do those things anymore. So prune your day. Prune your life. Get some things off your plate that you don't need to be doing. And that takes some delegation. At some points, that does take a little bit of money, because I'm suggesting that you delegate to others to do some things. If you're a boss or if you have someone who's serving under you, man, delegate some things. Get some things off of your plate and put them on others who can probably do it a lot better than you can and are probably getting paid to do those things as well. But there are some things, especially for my entrepreneurs, if you're a solopreneur, even more so, that look, man, you don't have anyone who's like working under you or any subordinates or anything like that. You're probably going to have to hire somebody to do some things. And this is a change that I literally just had to make in my life last week. I had to hire someone to just do some things for me. Instead of cutting my own grass, I ended up hiring somebody. Like, you've got to hire someone to do some things that you don't need to do so that you can manage your time and your creativity and everything that comes with that as well as you possibly can. Look, man, manage your time as best as you possibly can. Time is your ultimate currency. Manage it like it is.